One or two drizzles have quelled the scorching heat a little, isn't it? But still, it's really hot. Welcome once again to News Analysis. News Analysis, a weekly magazine on current affairs. To begin with, the main points in a nutshell. Oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico created great global concern. US Navy lifts ban on women submariners. Japan seeks to arrest anti-whaling Sea Shepherd activist Watson. 5 children hurt in fresh attack on school in China. India and Pakistan may be back into dialogues. Varkalada Thakrashan passes away. And now the news in detail. Oil reaches US Gulf Coast from spill. The US Coast Guard is investigating reports that oil has started washing ashore on Gulf Coast from a leaking offshore well. Up to 5,000 barrels of oil a day are thought to be spilling into the water after last week's explosion on a BP-operated rig, which then sank. President Barack Obama has pledged every single possible help to help the people. The US Navy has been deployed to help avert a looming environmental disaster. The US Coast Guard said it had sent investigators to confirm whether the crude oil has begun to wash up on parts of Louisiana shoreline. White House takes bigger role in the oil spill cleanup. The response to the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico intensified abruptly on Thursday, with the federal government intervening more aggressively as the rapidly growing slick drifted ever closer to the fragile coastline of Louisiana. Resources from the United States Navy were marshaled to supplement an operation that already consisted of more than 1,000 people and scores of vessels and aircraft. Calling it a spill of national significance which could threaten coastline in several states, Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano announced the creation of a second command post in Mobile, Ala, in addition to the one in Louisiana, to manage potential coastal impact in Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida. Interior Secretary Ken Salazar ordered an immediate review of the 30 offshore drilling rigs and 47 production platforms operating in deepwater Gulf and is sending teams to conduct on-site inspections. In Shov, Pakistan considers attack on militant lair. The Pakistani military, long reluctant to heed American urging that it attack Pakistani militant groups in their main base in North Waziristan, is coming around to the idea that it must do so in its own interests. Western officials have long believed that North Waziristan is the single most important haven for militants, with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban fighting American and NATO forces in Afghanistan. Pakistan has nurtured militant groups in the area for years in order to exert influence beyond its borders. US Navy lifts ban on women submariners. Women can now serve on US submarines after a ban was lifted. The US Defense Department had announced the move in February, and the deadline for any objection from Congress passed at midnight on last Wednesday. Training women for their new duties and the creation of appropriate quarters mean it could be more than a year before women take up their posts. The cramped conditions and previously precluded women despite serving alongside men on surface ships. About 15% of US Navy personnel are women. Japan seeks to arrest Sea Shepherd activist. The Japanese Coast Guard has obtained an arrest warrant for Canadian environmental activist Paul Watson for disrupting whale hunts, reports say. Mr. Watson Sea Shepherd Conservation Society shadowed the annual Japanese whaling trade through the Antarctic. He advocates direct action and has faced charges in Canada and Norway. Japan hunts hundreds of whales each year for what it calls research, but environmentalists say the real purpose is to sell whale meat. Sea Shepherd's campaign saw its vessels maneuvering close to Japan's whaling ships during the annual hunt in Southern Ocean. In January, one of its boats was destroyed in a crash with a Japanese harpoon vessel. Sea Shepherd says the incident has not been properly investigated. Thailand red shirt protesters storm Bangkok hospital. Patients have been evacuated from a hospital in Thai capital Bangkok after anti-government demonstrators forced their way into the grounds. The red shirts, looking for soldiers they thought were hiding there, later apologized for the incident. In a TV address, Prime Minister Abhishek Vejjajiva has said he will not tolerate further violence by the Reds, but gave no indication of any planned action. The red shirts are pressing the Thai government to call early elections. Patients at the Chulalongkorn hospital were sent to other hospitals, and all except emergency services had to be suspended after the brief incursion by about 100 red shirts on last Thursday night. 5 children hurt in fresh attack on school in China. 5 young children have been hurt at a school in northeastern China after a man attacked them with hammer before killing himself. The incident was the 3rd attack in China's schools in 3 days. The man, said to be a local farmer, grabbed 2 children before setting himself on fire at the preschool Shandong Province's Weifang city. The children were pulled to safety, and 5 plus an injured teacher were said to be stable in the hospital. China is reeling from spate of apparent copycat attacks in schools. On Thursday, 28 children, most of them aged around 4, and 3 adults were attacked by an unemployed man wielding a knife at a nursery school in Jiangsu Province, eastern China. 5 of the children were taken to hospital in a critical condition. India and Pakistan may be back into dialogues. India and Pakistan agreed on Thursday to the resumption of high-level dialogue, which has been disrupted since the Mumbai terror attacks of November 2008. Meeting on the sidelines of SAARC, South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation Summit, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and Pakistani Prime Minister Yusuf Raza Gilani decided to ask their foreign ministers and foreign secretaries to first discuss the modalities of restoring trust and confidence in bilateral ties. That would pave the way for talks on all issues of mutual concern, Foreign Secretary Nirupama Rao told media persons. In an hour-long interaction with aides, the 2 prime ministers focus on the renewal of dialogue and understand the factors that have resulted in the current state of affairs in the relationship. The meeting was an exercise in honesty in taking the process forward, added Ms. Rao. TV debate: Brown warns against rivals, call for change. Gordon Brown has made a plea to voters not to risk change as he sought salvage Labour's election campaign in the final TV debate before polling day. The Labour leader, whose party is a third in many opinion polls, warned against a Tory and Liberal Democrat coalition which should put at risk economic recovery. David Cameron said Mr. Brown was trying to scare the voters and Tories could deliver the change we need. Nick Clegg urged voters to choose the future you really want. The debate had no clear winner, but after the events of the past 48 hours, the momentum entering the final week of the campaign appeared to be with Mr. Cameron.